I'd like to talk today about the nature of a certain word, and more broadly, how words change meaning, and then talk about why this has happened and what it's a reflection of, given our current social atmosphere and climate. Now, for the record, and this is perhaps of interest to you or not, words change meaning all the time. And if you go far enough back, you'll realize that words often take on completely different meanings. So, for example, in the time of Shakespeare, the word absolute, which in contemporary English means something like whole or holy, as in entire, meant perfect or without flaw. Another example from the time of Shakespeare was honest. The word honest didn't mean sincere, but rather pure. And if you go even further back, something like 700 or 800 years, the word nice, which these days means pleasant or agreeable, didn't mean that at all. It meant ignorant, stupid, or dumb. And so, this is the nature of human language. Words change meaning over time. That's nothing new. But what's interesting in each case where there's a semantic shift, as it would be referred to, is the social background and the cause of it. Now, in the case of cope, you've heard it all the time. Everyone is using the word cope. Cope, 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 copium, he's just coping, and so on and so forth. And depending on your age bracket, or just how much you observe online discourse, you might think that it means one thing or the other. Something like 30 years ago, the word cope meant something very specific. It usually referred to a set of circumstances that were difficult that a person had to deal with. And you would say something to the effect of, oh, he's coping with the loss of his wife. He's coping as best as he can in light of his illness or in light of being fired from his job. The implication of which was, of course, that he's doing the best. He's trying his best under a set of difficult circumstances that are not ideal, but nonetheless he's doing his best to persevere. And generally speaking, there was an optimistic tone to it, a positive tone, even if the circumstances themselves were always negative. Now, I challenge you in today's current climate to find more than a single instance in contemporary speech where cope is used in that sense, in the positive sense of trying to deal with one's circumstances as best as one can. No, cope has taken on a virtually entirely different meaning, and on top of that, the valence, that is, the positive or good of it, has become very negative. So cope has taken on an entirely negative valence. So what exactly do people mean when they're talking about cope these days? Well, I think it's best encapsulated in the word copium, which is a neologism, of course, but it's a combination of the word opium and cope. And oftentimes you'll have the word just thrown in there. He's just coping. What cope means in the current climate, in contemporary English you could argue, is the following. It means rationalizing a set of propositions to oneself that would otherwise not be true, or it can refer to that's entirely negative, as I said, and there are many examples of this, but is in fact not. So in effect, hopes that cannot be realized. In the case of vain hope, you could consider the example of somebody saying, oh, they really, really wish that the next Mass Effect would be really good, or the next Dragon Age, games produced by BioWare. And BioWare, of course, is a shell of its former self. And you would tell this person, you're just coping. That's just cope. You wish that BioWare produced a good game in the future, but they don't have the manpower, they don't have the original people working there, and so it's very unlikely, and therefore you say, that's just cope. You're just coping. Now, notice, again, this has nothing to do with dealing with difficult circumstances. This has to do with self-delusion, which is another variant of cope. Self-delusion, self-rationalization. Another example and context where this is used, of course, is in online debate or in contentious situations where two people are at odds with each other, arguing a point that they don't agree on. And so ultimately one side is viewed as having been the victor, and the other side is viewed as having been the loser, the one who's been defeated, and the defeated person might say X, Y, Z, that they actually think that their argument is still true because of blah, 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 and then the other person says that's just cope, or the audience says he's just coping. So he's deluding himself, he's rationalizing to himself something that is in fact not true. And it is fascinating how words change meaning. It's a pet interest of mine. But I'm not going to bore you with the details of semantic shift and what have you, because I'm trying to talk about this in the context of social change and the general social climate we exist in these days. Notice how I've said the valence has become entirely negative, and that's for good reason. If you think about the emergence of this new version of COPE, it's emerged almost entirely within the confines of online discourse and online discussion. And the fact that it's so negative is very telling. It tells you that what's most salient about online discourse is negative. It's destructive. It's pessimistic. And look, I don't deny my own pessimism here. But what I'm trying to illustrate here is that online interactions, by and large, are at best neutral and most of the time very negative. And we can see this by means of looking at the semantic shift that's taken place in the word cope. Nobody uses the word cope in an encouraging way anymore. Try to ask a Zoomer what cope means. They'll describe it in the way I've described it, as self-delusion, as vain hope, as a self-rationalization about things that aren't true. And that's where this neologism, this composite of cope and opium comes from. Opium, of course, being a narcotic that can mess with your mind. You combine the two, and the guy is sniffing the fumes of copium. He's deluding himself into thinking something is true when it's in fact not. And it's very telling. If you think about the things that are most attractive to people online in terms of discourse, it is almost of necessity the negative stuff. And that's especially true in debates. Very few people find fruitful discussion as interesting. I'm not saying they don't find it interesting, as interesting as something like blood sports, or two people coming from vastly different positions, fighting with each other and trying to verbally take each other's heads off. People find that much more compelling. And of course, this is more broadly a reflection of human nature. We tend to be drawn more to the negative than the positive. It's a form of that negativity bias that most human beings have. Okay, that's fair enough. But there's something more to this, and that is the general outright hostility, which I think is a separate issue from negativity, because I'm referred to as negative and pessimistic, but I would never describe myself as necessarily hostile. It's the hostility that individual persons have towards other persons, and how that's encouraged, and how that's generally speaking thought as the new status quo. So you don't want to get along with people, which is really difficult in online discourse, obviously. You want to constantly put them down. You want to constantly put them in their place. And this is testified in this new meaning of the word cope, which is why I'm referring to this as a broader reflection of trends. It used to be that we attempted to get along with each other. We tried at least to even get along with people we disagreed with, or best have a neutral disposition, or perhaps a position of avoidance with respect to people we didn't agree with, that we didn't necessarily get along with, or on different wavelengths. These days, people actively seek conflict. They actively seek to destroy the other. And if I were a betting man, or a man who predicts things, which I'm not, by the way, I would say that we will see more such instances of this semantic shift in online discourse, in human language, where words that used to be neutral or positive take on a much more negative meaning. And the word cope is fascinating because even in online German discourse, it's a thing. I talk to a lot of younger German people, and in the German language, they've borrowed this from English. Copium and cope are perfectly normal words in the sense I've just described it, which really goes to show that this isn't just a phenomenon limited to the United States or Britain. This is becoming international. This antagonism and hostility towards other people, which is not just amplified, it's produced online. It's a product of the internet. Now, again, I'm generally speaking a quote-unquote negative person, a pessimistic person, but I do not endorse hostility of the sort that I've described. It doesn't get anyone further in life. It's not helping anybody, and certainly not helping people who are steeped in the discourse and steeped in the culture. Most of the time, they're not even aware of this, and they're not even aware of these semantic shifts. Anyway, I don't want to bore you too much with this topic, and as always, thank you for checking out the video. Many special thanks to my patrons, my donors on PayPal. You guys are the lifeblood of the channel. You keep the channel alive in light of YouTube trying to get rid of my channel, etc., etc. You guys are absolutely the best. And as for everybody else, if you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, be much appreciated. Views have been down quite a bit. I have no idea why. The algorithm is mysterious to me, at least when it comes to my channel. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out next time. Until then, may the gods truly watch over you. Bye-bye for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.